committed a crime that could destroy everything I've built, Sophia whispered, tears streaming down her face as she looked across the kitchen table at Adrian. The soft glow of pendant lights illuminated her anguished expression. The son I've raised for 3 years isn't legally mine. Adrian's hand froze mid-air, coffee cup suspended between table and lips. His steel-gray eyes widened, processing her words. Outside, rain tapped gently against the windows of his expansive hillside home, nothing like the violent storm that had brought them together 3 months earlier. "What do you mean?" he asked, setting down his cup with deliberate care. Sophia's shoulders trembled as she glanced toward the hallway where 6-year-old Marco slept peacefully, unaware his world might soon collapse. "I forged documents. I created a false identity. Her voice cracked. "I smuggled him across international borders." Lightning flashed outside, illuminating the kitchen in stark white for a heartbeat, a visual echo of the shock crossing Adrian's face. His expression shifted from confusion to disbelief, to something Sophia couldn't quite read. "If authorities discover what I've done," she continued, fingers clutching her mug so tightly her knuckles turned white, "I'll lose my medical license. I could face criminal charges. And Marco—" Her voice broke completely. "They would take him away." Adrian Maxwell, billionaire CEO, pillar of the business community, widowed father, pushed back from the table, the legs of his chair scraping against hardwood flooring. The sound sliced through the tension between them. "Why are you telling me this now?" he asked, his voice unnaturally calm. Sophia's confession hung in the air between them as Adrian stood and walked to the window. Rain streaked down the glass in chaotic patterns, much like the thoughts racing through his mind. "How far would you go to protect someone you love?" he finally asked, his back still turned to her. "What price would you pay for family?" The questions weren't accusatory. They were genuine. 3 years earlier, when his wife Catherine was diagnosed with terminal cancer, he had pulled every string, called in every favor, exhausted his considerable fortune seeking experimental treatments. He had bent rules, crossed ethical lines, all to save the woman he loved. "I don't know what I wouldn't do for Lily," he continued, thinking of his 10-year-old daughter who had formed an instant bond with Marco. As a parent, the line between right and wrong blurs when your child's welfare is at stake. Sophia watched him carefully, searching for judgment in the set of his shoulders. "Before you decide what to think of me," she said quietly, "let me ask you this. If you found an orphaned, wounded child in a war zone with no functioning government, no reliable system to protect them, would you leave that child to an uncertain fate, or would you do whatever necessary to give them safety, love, a future?" Adrian turned to face her, his expression softening. "Is that what happened with Marco?" "That's only the beginning," Sophia replied, tucking a strand of dark hair behind her ear. "And if you still want to hear the rest after knowing I've broken international law, I'll tell you everything." Adrian's gaze traveled to the refrigerator door where Marco's colorful drawing hung, 4 stick figures holding hands beneath a yellow sun. "Mr. Adrian, Dr. Mom, Lily, and me" was scrawled across the bottom in a child's uneven handwriting. "When a desperate act of compassion collides with falling in love," he murmured, "the consequences could tear apart not just 2 lives, but 2 children who finally found happiness." He returned to the table, sitting closer to Sophia this time. "The night I found you stranded in that storm, I had no idea where it would lead." Now Lily laughs again. "Marco has stopped having nightmares. And you!" His voice softened. "You've brought light back into this house." Sophia reached across the table, her fingers stopping just short of his. "That's why I have to leave. Tonight. Before this gets even more complicated." "It's already complicated," Adrian said. "The moment you stepped into my car, the moment Marco and Lily became inseparable, the moment I realized I was falling in love with you, it was already too late for simple solutions." Sophia's eyes filled with fresh tears. "I never meant for any of this to happen. I was supposed to stay 2 weeks in your guest house, then find a new apartment. I never intended to let you into our lives." "But you did," Adrian said, "and now 4 lives are intertwined. If you leave tonight, you won't just be breaking my heart, you'll be breaking Lily's too." The weight of this truth settled between them like a physical presence. "Can love survive a secret that could lead to prison?" Sophie asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "And will a family forged in crisis weather the storm of truth?" The kitchen clock ticked loudly in the silence that followed. Outside, the rain intensified, mirroring the growing tension. "I need to know what we're facing," Adrian said finally. "Not just vague possibilities, but concrete risks." What exactly could happen if your actions were discovered? Sophia took a deep breath. Best case, I lose my medical license and face deportation. Worst case, federal charges for document fraud, illegal immigration violations, and potential international kidnapping allegations. I could serve years in prison, and Marco would enter the foster care system with no guarantee of where he'd end up. Adrian ran a hand through his salt and pepper hair. And the chances of discovery? Growing every day, Sophia admitted. When I was just an overworked single mother renting a small apartment, flying under the radar was possible. But now? She gestured around them. Dating one of the city's most prominent businessmen puts me in a spotlight I can't afford. Someone will eventually investigate my background, especially if we continue this relationship. Adrian leaned forward. What if I told you I have resources that could help? Legal experts, connections in immigration. No, Sophia interrupted firmly. I won't let you compromise your integrity or your business. You have shareholders, employees who depend on you, your daughter's future to consider. One wrong move could destroy everything you've built. So you'd rather just disappear? Take Marco away from the first stable home he's known, away from Lily, who already considers him a brother. The impossible choice hung between them, both options devastating in their own way. Welcome back to the Mr. Ross Story Trail, where life's most powerful lessons unfold through the stories we share. I'm your host, and today's tale touches on something fundamental to the human experience. The lengths we go to for those we love, and the impossible choices that test not just our hearts, but our moral compass. For those joining us for the first time, this channel brings you authentic stories of human courage, sacrifice, and redemption. Stories that make us question what we would do in similar circumstances. Stories that remind us that life isn't always black and white, but filled with complex shades of gray. The story of Adrian and Sophia begins with a chance encounter during a storm, a simple act of kindness offering a ride to a stranded stranger. But as we've just glimpsed, beneath the surface lies a complicated truth that threatens everything they've begun to build together. What would you risk for love? What would you sacrifice for family? These questions lie at the heart of today's story. Wealthy CEO father rescues tearful single mom doctor during storm, not knowing her tragic secret. As we continue their journey, we'll see how past decisions shape present realities, how truth becomes both weapon and shield, and ultimately, how courage in the face of impossible odds can forge unbreakable bonds. But before we continue with Adrian and Sophia's story, I want to take a moment to thank each of you for making this channel what it is today. Every story on this channel comes from the heart, carefully crafted to not just entertain, but to make us reflect on our own lives and choices. If this is your first time here, I invite you to join our community by hitting that subscribe button right now. Your support allows me to continue bringing these powerful narratives to life. For my loyal viewers who return each week, thank you for your continued support. Your comments and insights enrich our discussions and often inspire future stories. If today's introduction has sparked something within you, a memory, a question, or an emotion, share your thoughts in the comments below. What would you do if faced with Sophia's impossible choice? Or Adrian's dilemma? Sometimes the most meaningful conversations start with these difficult questions. Before we dive deeper into Adrian and Sophia's story, take a moment to give this video a thumbs up if you're enjoying it so far. This simple action helps others discover our channel and grows our storytelling community. Now, let's return to that rainy night 3 months earlier, when a chance encounter between two strangers set in motion a chain of events that would test the boundaries of love, law, and loyalty. 3 months earlier, Adrian Maxwell drummed his fingers against the leather steering wheel of his Range Rover, eyes fixed on the road ahead as windshield wipers fought a losing battle against the downpour. Weather alerts flashed on his dashboard display, warning of flash floods throughout Lakeside County. At 42, Adrian had mastered the art of navigating business crises with calm precision. Weather, however, remained beyond his control. As CEO of Maxwell Enterprises, he had transformed a modest tech startup into a billion-dollar company specializing in medical software systems. The journey had demanded relentless dedication, often at the expense of his personal life. The rain intensified as lightning split the sky, illuminating framed photos mounted on his dashboard. Lily, his 10-year-old daughter, with her mother, Catherine. The images captured happier times, before cancer claimed Catherine 3 years earlier, leaving Adrian to raise their child alone. Sir, the board is requesting an update on the Meridian merger. His assistant's voice came through the car's speaker system. "They're concerned about the regulatory filings." Adrian sighed. "Tell them I'm reviewing the final documents tonight. We'll discuss everything at tomorrow's meeting, assuming this storm doesn't wash away half the city." "The weather service just upgraded to a severe flood warning," his assistant replied. "Perhaps you should head home instead of the office." Adrian glanced at his watch. 8:45 p.m. "I need those papers signed tonight. The downtown exit's just ahead. I'll be fine." As he ended the call, Adrian reflected on the irony of his situation. He commanded a company with over 5,000 employees, yet struggled to balance spreadsheets with school plays. Lily deserved better. His therapist had suggested he delegate more, but control was difficult to relinquish when perfectionism had fueled his success. The Range Rover splashed through deepening water as Adrian navigated toward downtown Lakeside, the city's gleaming towers barely visible through sheets of rain. The local radio cut through with an emergency broadcast. All residents in low-lying areas are urged to evacuate immediately. Flash flooding has already submerged portions of River Street and Commerce Avenue. Emergency services are overwhelmed with calls. Adrian reduced his speed as water levels rose around his tires. The windshield wipers worked at maximum capacity but provided only seconds of visibility between sweeps. Streetlights flickered, threatening to plunge the city into darkness. His phone rang again. Lily's grandmother. "Adrian, dear, the power just went out at our house," his mother-in-law explained. "Lily's a bit frightened. She's asking for you." "Put her on," Adrian said, guilt washing over him. He should be with his daughter, not chasing paperwork. "Daddy?" Lily's small voice carried through the speakers. "When are you coming home? Grandma says there might be a flood like in my books." "I'll be home soon, sweetheart," he promised. "You're safe with Grandma and Grandpa. Their house is on high ground, remember? Try to think of it as an adventure. Like our camping trip?" Lily asked, her voice brightening slightly. "Exactly like that." Adrian smiled despite his concern. "I love you, Lily Pad. Be brave for me." After ending the call, Adrian made a decision. The papers could wait. He needed to get to his in-laws' house in the northern hills. He activated his turn signal, preparing to change direction, when his headlights illuminated a bus shelter on the corner. A solitary figure huddled there, drenched despite the minimal cover. Something about their desperation made Adrian slow the vehicle. The figure, a woman in blue medical scrubs, clutched a phone to her ear, her posture radiating distress. Her dark hair was plastered to her face as she paced the small shelter, seemingly oblivious to the luxury vehicle idling nearby. Adrian rolled down his passenger window, rain immediately pelting the interior. "Excuse me," he called out. "Do you need help?" The woman looked up, startled. Even through the rain, Adrian could see she'd been crying, her eyes reddened and swollen. She ended her call and approached his vehicle cautiously. "The bus has stopped running an hour ago," Adrian explained. "Are you trying to get home?" Up close, he noticed details. An ID badge clipped to her scrubs identifying her as Dr. S. Rivera from Lakeside Memorial Hospital, exhaustion etched across her face, and a quiet dignity despite her bedraggled appearance. "My car stalled 2 blocks back," she explained, her voice strained. Water flooded the engine. "I need to get to Willow Drive Apartments immediately. My son, he's with a sitter, and our building's first floor is flooding." Without hesitation, Adrian unlocked the doors. "Get in. I'll take you." She hesitated only briefly before climbing into the passenger seat, bringing the scent of antiseptic and rain. "Thank you," she breathed, her shoulders relaxing slightly as warmth enveloped her. "I'm Sophia Rivera, pediatric surgeon at Lakeside Memorial, Adrian Maxwell," he replied, turning the car toward Willow Drive. "Your son, how old is he?" "Marco's 6, Sophia answered, clutching her seatbelt as the SUV navigated through increasingly hazardous conditions. "He's terrified of storms, there's a reason, but—" She trailed off, leaving the explanation unfinished as she checked her phone again. Adrian nodded, sensing her reluctance to elaborate. "My daughter's the same way. After her mother passed, thunderstorms became particularly difficult for her." Sophia's expression softened with understanding. "I'm sorry about your wife." "Thank you," Adrian replied, navigating around a fallen branch. "It's been 3 years now." As they drove, Adrian noted Sophia's wedding ring-free left hand and the dark circles under her eyes suggesting long hospital shifts. Despite her evident exhaustion, there was strength in her posture, determination in the set of her jaw. Sophia, meanwhile, was taking in the vehicle's leather interior and Adrian's tailored suit. She'd recognized his name immediately. Maxwell Enterprises had donated the children's wing of her hospital. The media occasionally featured him at charity events, describing him as both brilliant and intensely private following his wife's death. "Your son will be okay," Adrian said, breaking the silence. "These SUVs can handle deep water. I should never have taken the extra shift," Sophia replied, guilt evident in her voice. The regular forecasts didn't predict flooding this severe. "No one could have anticipated this," Adrian assured her. "The Weather Service only issued the severe warning an hour ago." As they approached Willow Drive, emergency lights flashed ahead. Fire trucks and police cruisers blocked the entrance to Sophia's apartment complex. Her face paled as she saw water reaching the first-floor windows. "Oh God," she whispered. Marco's babysitter said they moved to the fourth floor, but Adrian pulled as close as possible to the emergency vehicles. "What unit?" 412, Sophia answered, already reaching for the door handle. "Wait," Adrian said, pulling a flashlight from his glove compartment. "I'm coming with you." Their eyes met briefly, a moment of connection amid chaos, before they stepped into the storm together. Water surged around their ankles as Adrian and Sophia pushed through the apartment building's entrance. Emergency lights cast a dim red glow across the flooded lobby, where firefighters directed residents toward the stairwell. "Ma'am, you can't go in there," a police officer called, reaching for Sophia's arm. "We're evacuating the building." "My son is on the fourth floor," Sophia replied, her voice steady despite her panic. "I'm a doctor. I know the risks." Adrian stepped forward. "We'll be quick. Just need to retrieve her child and any essential medications." The officer hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. "Make it fast. The building's electrical system is compromised." The stairwell was crowded with residents carrying hastily packed belongings. Sophia took the steps two at a time, Adrian close behind her. The higher they climbed, the darker it became, with only Adrian's flashlight illuminating their path. "Marco!" Sophia called as they reached the fourth floor. "Elena." A young woman appeared in the hallway, relief washing over her face. "Dr. Rivera, thank God you're here. We're in the neighbor's apartment, 414. Marco won't stop crying." They followed Elena through the dimly lit corridor. Water dripped from the ceiling in steady streams, the building groaning under the storm's assault. The carpet squished beneath their feet, completely saturated. Inside apartment 414, huddled in a corner wrapped in blankets, sat Marco, a small boy with dark curls in Sophia's eyes. When he saw his mother, he launched himself into her arms with a sob. "Mommy, the ceiling broke. Water came in my room." Sophia held him tightly, murmuring reassurances in Spanish before switching to English. "It's okay, mi amor. I'm here now. We're going somewhere safe." Adrian stood back, giving them space while assessing the situation. Through the open door to apartment 412, he could see significant damage. Part of the ceiling had collapsed onto Marco's bed, and water poured through multiple points in the roof. "Your apartment is inhabitable," Adrian stated quietly to Sophia. "The structural damage is extensive." The building manager appeared in the doorway, clipboard in hand. "Dr. Rivera, I'm so sorry. At least 6 units have ceiling collapses, including yours. The building won't be safe for at least 2 weeks, possibly longer." Sophia's face fell as she looked around the neighbor's apartment. "Can we at least get some of our things?" "I can give you 5 minutes," the manager replied. "Grab essentials only. The fire department wants everyone out of SAP." With Marco clinging to her neck, Sophia entered their damaged apartment. Adrian followed, directing his flashlight toward areas that seemed structurally sound. "I can help carry things," he offered. "Just tell me what you need." "Marco's medication is in the bathroom cabinet," Sophia directed. "And there's a blue backpack in my closet with important documents." While Sophia grabbed clothes and Marco's favorite stuffed elephant, Adrian located the item she'd mentioned. The backpack was surprisingly heavy, filled with folders, a laptop, and what felt like photo albums. Water continued to pour through the ceiling, forming expanding puddles on the floor. The walls had begun to bubble where water had seeped behind the paint. "Time's up," the building manager called from the hallway. "Everyone needs to evacuate now." Adrian zipped the backpack closed and slung it over his shoulder. Sophia had filled a small suitcase with clothes and Marco's comfort items. The boy refused to let go of his mother, his small arms locked around her neck. As they headed for the stairwell, a loud crack echoed through the apartment. Another section of ceiling collapsed behind them, sending water cascading into the living room. "Let's go," Adrian urged, placing a protective hand on Sophia's back as they joined the stream of evacuees descending the stairs. Outside, the rain had finally begun to subside. The water still flowed through the streets like shallow rivers. Emergency vehicles lined the block, their lights painting the night in alternating red and blue. Displaced residents huddled under a temporary shelter erected by disaster response teams. "They're setting up emergency housing at the high school," the police officer informed them. "Buses are transporting people there now." Sophia looked around at the crowded scene, then down at Marco, who had finally fallen asleep against her shoulder, emotionally exhausted. "The shelters will be overcrowded," Adrian observed quietly, "and likely noisy." He made a decision, one that felt right despite knowing little about the woman standing beside him. Something about her strength, her clear devotion to her son, resonated with him. "I have a guest house on my property," he offered. "It's fully furnished, separate from the main house and on high ground away from the flooding. You're welcome to stay there until your apartment is repaired." Sophia looked up at him, surprise evident in her expression. "That's incredibly generous, but we couldn't impose." "It's sitting empty," Adrian continued. "And it would be more comfortable for Marco than a shelter. There's plenty of space, a kitchen stocked with basics, and most importantly, quiet for him to recover from tonight's trauma." He pulled out his phone, showing her pictures of the charming two-bedroom cottage situated behind his main residence. "It's completely private. You'd have your own entrance and parking space." Sophia shifted Marco's weight in her arms, conflict evident on her face. "Mr. Maxwell." "Adrian," he corrected gently. "Adrian," she amended. "You've already done so much, driving me here, helping retrieve our things." "Which is precisely why spending the night in a shelter makes little sense when there's a better option," he reasoned. "It's just temporary accommodation, nothing more." Sophia glanced toward the emergency buses, then back at Marco's sleeping face. The thought of waking him, of spending the night in a gymnasium filled with cots and strangers, made her heart ache. Still, caution prevailed. "It's a kind offer, but I don't make a habit of accepting invitations from men I've just met, no matter how well-intentioned." Adrian nodded, respecting her concern, completely understandable. "Would it help if I mentioned that my 10-year-old daughter lives with me, along with Mrs. Winters, our housekeeper of 15 years. The guest house is for visiting colleagues and family friends, not some dubious arrangement." He pulled up another photo on his phone, this one showing Lily with a woman in her 60s, both smiling on the front porch of his home. Sophia studied the image, her resolve weakening. Marco stirred in her arms, whimpering slightly in his sleep. "One night," she conceded finally, "just until I can make proper arrangements tomorrow." Relief washed over Adrian's face. "Perfect. My driver can take us there now. I sent for him when we were inside. He should be here any minute." As if on cue, a black Escalade pulled up to the curb, navigating carefully through the receding floodwaters. "You planned this before I agreed?" Sophia asked, raising an eyebrow. "I planned for multiple possibilities," Adrian replied with a small smile. "It's what I do." Friends, sometimes the greatest acts of kindness come from strangers. As we watch Adrian and Sophia navigate this unexpected situation, I'm reminded of how crucial it is to extend help when we see someone in need. Have you ever experienced a moment where someone's generosity changed your trajectory? Or perhaps you've been the one offering help during someone else's crisis? These moments of human connection often become turning points in our lives. If you're enjoying this story so far, please take a second to hit that like button. It helps our channel reach more viewers who appreciate these meaningful narratives. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect moment to join our community. Click that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Your comments also matter tremendously. Share your thoughts about Adrian's offer or Sophia's hesitation in the comments section below. Would you have made the same choices in their positions? Now, let's continue our journey with Adrian and Sophia as they arrive at his estate and begin to form unexpected connections that will ultimately change both their lives forever. Morning sunlight streamed through the guest house windows as Sophia awoke, momentarily disoriented by unfamiliar surroundings. The events of the previous night came flooding back. The storm, the apartment damage, Adrian Maxwell's unexpected kindness. She found Marco already awake, exploring the cottage with wide-eyed curiosity. "Mommy, this place has a cookie jar shaped like a bear." Sophia smiled, relieved to see her son rebounding from the previous night's trauma. "Did you look inside it?" "Not yet," Marco admitted. "Is it okay to open things here?" "Let's ask our host first," Sophia suggested, running a hand through her tangled hair. She needed a shower and coffee, in that order. A gentle knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Adrian stood outside holding a tray with fresh coffee, pastries, and orange juice. "I thought you might need breakfast," he said with a smile. "How did you both sleep?" "Like logs," Sophia admitted, accepting the tray gratefully. "Thank you again for this. I called the apartment manager this morning. They're estimating at least 2 weeks before the building is habitable." Adrian nodded. "Stay as long as you need. The guest house is yours." "Actually," he hesitated, "my daughter Lily gets home from her grandparents' house today. She's been asking me to find a doctor for her school's career day next week. Would you consider talking with her about being a surgeon?" Before Sophia could respond, a car pulled into the driveway. A girl with copper-colored hair leapt out, racing toward Adrian. "Daddy!" Lily Maxwell threw herself into her father's arms. Adrian lifted her with ease. "Lilypad, I've missed you. I want you to meet our guests." He set her down gently. "This is Dr. Rivera and her son Marco. They're staying in our guest house for a while." Lily approached with confident curiosity. "You're a real doctor? With a stethoscope and everything?" Sophia laughed. "With a stethoscope and everything." Marco peeked from behind his mother's legs, studying the older child with interest. "I have a microscope that shows actual bacteria," Lily announced. "Want to see?" Marco looked up at his mother, silently requesting permission. "Maybe after breakfast," Sophia suggested, watching the immediate connection forming between the children. The 4 of them shared breakfast on the guest house patio, conversation flowing easily. By the time they'd finished eating, Lily had convinced Marco to explore the garden with her, showing him the koi pond and her collection of interesting rocks. Adrian watched them through the window. "They're getting along well." "Children adapt quickly," Sophia observed. "Marco's usually shy with new people." "Lily too, since her mother died," Adrian replied. "She's different with him, more like her old self." Their eyes met in shared understanding, 2 single parents navigating difficult waters, recognizing something familiar in each other's journey. The temporary arrangement quickly developed into a comfortable routine. Sophia returned to her surgical schedule at the hospital, while Adrian arranged for Marco to join the small group of children cared for by Mrs. Winters during the day. The housekeeper reported that Marco and Lily had become inseparable, with the older girl taking on the role of protective mentor. "Lily taught Marco to fold paper airplanes today," Mrs. Winters informed Adrian one evening. "She was remarkably patient, showing him multiple times until he got it right." "That doesn't sound like my impatient daughter," Adrian remarked with surprise. "Children rise to expectations," Mrs. Winters replied wisely. "She feels responsible for him." When Sophia returned from her shifts, the 4 often shared dinner together, sometimes in Adrian's formal dining room, sometimes as picnics on the lawn. The children would disappear afterward to play elaborate games of their own invention, leaving the adults to conversation that grew increasingly personal. "What made you choose pediatric surgery?" Adrian asked one evening as they sat on the terrace, watching the sunset while the children chased fireflies on the lawn below. Sophia cradled her wineglass, considering her answer. "I was drawn to the resilience of children. Their bodies heal differently, more completely than adults. There's something profound about intervening at a crucial moment and potentially giving someone their entire life back." Adrian nodded thoughtfully. "That's what Catherine said about teaching, that with children, you're not just fixing the present, you're shaping the future." "You miss her very much," Sophia observed gently. "Every day," Adrian admitted, "but differently now. The sharp pain has mellowed into something more manageable. Watching Lily laugh with Marco, it helps." "Time doesn't heal all wounds," Sophia replied, "but it teaches us to carry them differently." Adrian studied her face in the fading light. "You speak from experience." Sophia didn't respond directly, instead asking, "Do you play piano? I noticed the grand piano in your living room." Catherine played. "I'm learning. Poorly," Adrian confessed with a self-deprecating smile. "Would you like to hear how badly I massacre Chopin?" Their laughter carried across the garden, drawing curious glances from the children below. 3 weeks into their stay, with the apartment repairs continuing, Sophia found herself in Adrian's home office, borrowing his printer for hospital documents. While waiting for the papers to print, she noticed framed photographs on the wall. Adrian in remote locations, surrounded by medical equipment and local healthcare workers. When Adrian entered, she gestured toward the images. These don't match the corporate titan image the media portrays. Adrian looked momentarily embarrassed. The Maxwell Foundation's work in developing regions isn't something we publicize heavily. It started as Catherine's project. She believed strongly in healthcare equity. Mobile surgical units, Sophia identified, examining one photo more closely. These have revolutionized care in remote areas. Adrian's eyebrows rose in surprise. Most people don't recognize the equipment. I use similar units with Doctors Without Borders, Sophia explained. Before Lakeside Memorial, before Marco. You worked with MSF? Adrian asked, impressed. Where? Central Africa, parts of Southeast Asia, briefly in South America, Sophia replied, her expression growing distant. 3 years in total. That must have been challenging with the young child, Adrian observed carefully. Sophia's smile faltered. Marco wasn't with me then. He came into my life after I returned to the States. Adrian sensed her withdrawal and changed the subject, but filed away this information. Another piece of the puzzle that was Sofia Rivera. Later that week, he found her medical journal articles online. Groundbreaking work on pediatric trauma procedures developed in conflict zones. The publications ended abruptly 3 years earlier, around the time she said Marco had entered her life. The timeline raised questions, but Adrian respected her privacy too much to pry. Your foundation's surgical equipment saved countless lives in regions I served, Sophia mentioned one evening as they prepared dinner together, the children setting the table nearby. The portable anesthesia machines were particularly valuable. We're launching a new initiative next month, Adrian replied, chopping vegetables with precision. Training local doctors in specialized pediatric procedures. Sophia looked up from stirring the sauce. That's exactly what these regions need. Sustainable knowledge transfer, not just equipment drops. Would you consider consulting on the program? Adrian asked. Your field experience would be invaluable. Sophia's knife paused mid-slice. I don't do international work anymore. Marco needs stability. The consultation would be entirely local, Adrian clarified. Curriculum development, training protocols, nothing requiring travel. Relief crossed Sophia's face. In that case, I'd be honored. As weeks passed and their professional collaboration deepened, Adrian noticed patterns in Sophia's behavior. Her reluctance to discuss her time abroad, her protective hovering when strangers approached Marco, her careful avoidance of social media and photographs. One Saturday afternoon, while the children built elaborate Lego structures, Adrian caught Sophia staring at Marco with an expression of fierce protection mingled with what looked like guilt. You okay? He asked quietly, joining her on the window seat. Just thinking, she replied, about how quickly life changes. 6 weeks ago, we were strangers. Now what? Adrian prompted when she didn't continue. Sophia turned to him, vulnerability evident in her expression. Now I'm afraid of what happens when we need to leave. Marco adores Lily. He's happier than I've ever seen him. Who says you have to leave? The words escaped before Adrian could consider their implications. The air between them changed one evening in the kitchen, when reaching for the same wine glass caused their fingers to brush. Neither pulled away immediately, the simple contact sending electricity through both of them. Sorry, Adrian murmured, not sounding sorry at all. Sophia met his gaze, her professional composure momentarily slipping. Don't be. The possibility of something more hovered between them, unspoken but increasingly difficult to ignore. It manifested in lingering glances across the dinner table, in the way Adrian's hand would rest briefly on the small of her back when they walked together, in how Sophia found reasons to stop by his home office with questions that could have been texted. The children noticed, exchanging meaningful looks when their parents stood too close or laughed too long at jokes that weren't particularly funny. Dr. Mom likes your dad, Marco informed Lily matter-of-factly as they collected shells by the koi pond. Duh, Lily replied with the wisdom of her additional 4 years. Dad likes her too. He wears cologne now. Their first kiss happened naturally, after the children were asleep following movie night. Sophia helped Adrian collect popcorn bowls and empty soda cans, their movements a synchronized dance in the dimly lit kitchen. "Thank you," Sophia said suddenly, setting down the dish towel. "For what? My superior popcorn-making skills?" Adrian teased. "For giving us a home when we needed one. For making Marco feel safe. For—" She hesitated. "For seeing me as more than just a doctor or a mother." Adrian moved closer, setting down the glass he'd been drying. "Is that what I do?" "You know it is," Sophia replied softly. Adrian gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. "I wasn't looking for this," he admitted. "Neither was I," Sophia whispered. The kiss began tentatively, a question asked and answered in the press of lips, the slight intake of breath. It deepened as Sophia's arms wound around his neck, as Adrian's hands settled at her waist, drawing her closer. When they finally pulled apart, both slightly breathless, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. "That was overdue," Sophia finished for him, a smile playing at her lips. That night marked a turning point. What had been unspoken became acknowledged, carefully, mindfully, with the awareness that two children's hearts were entangled in whatever developed between them. They moved slowly, stealing moments when the children were occupied. A kiss in the garden, hands entwined during evening walks, late-night conversations that stretched until dawn, sharing dreams and fears and everything in between. Everything except the shadow that sometimes darkened Sophia's eyes when conversation drifted too close to her past. Autumn painted the landscape surrounding Adrian's estate in warm hues of amber and gold. What had begun as a temporary shelter during a crisis had evolved into something neither Adrian nor Sophia had anticipated. 2 months had passed since the flood, and though Sophia's apartment had been repaired weeks ago, neither she nor Adrian had mentioned her moving out. Their relationship flourished in the comfortable rhythm they'd established. Mornings began with shared coffee on the terrace before Adrian headed to his office and Sophia to the hospital. Evenings brought family dinners filled with the children's animated stories and plans for weekend activities. Nights often ended with Adrian and Sophia talking for hours, discovering the many ways their different worlds overlapped. The hospital board approved my proposal for the pediatric trauma center, Sophia announced one evening as they walked the grounds after dinner, their fingers intertwined. "Construction begins next month." Adrian squeezed her hand. "That's wonderful news. Your presentation must have been compelling." Having the CEO of Maxwell Enterprises endorse the project certainly helped, Sophia admitted with a smile. "Though I suspect your generous donation was the real convincer." "The donation was well-deserved," Adrian replied. "The center will save countless lives. Besides, it's not every day I get to support both an incredible cause and an incredible woman." Sophia leaned into him, resting her head against his shoulder. "We make a good team." "We do," Adrian agreed, his tone growing more serious. "In more ways than one." He stopped walking, turning to face her under the glow of garden lights. "Have you noticed how seamlessly our lives have merged? How the children behave like siblings who've known each other forever? How this feels less like a temporary arrangement and more like a family?" Sophia finished softly. Adrian nodded. "Exactly. A family." The word hung between them, full of possibility and unspoken questions. One crisp November evening, Adrian invited Sophia to dinner at the city's most exclusive restaurant. Mrs. Winters stayed with the children, who were engrossed in building a massive fort in the living room. The restaurant's private dining room offered breathtaking views of the city skyline. Candles flickered on the table between them as a string quartet played softly in the background. "This is beautiful," Sophia remarked, taking in the elegant setting. "What's the occasion?" Adrian took her hand across the table. "Does there need to be one?" "You're not typically this extravagant without reason," Sophia observed with a knowing smile. "You're planning something." Adrian's eyes crinkled at the corners. "You've learned to read me well." "Professional skill," Sophia teased. "Surgeons are excellent observers." Adrian laughed, then grew serious. "I've been thinking about our situation. Your apartment lease ends next month, and you mentioned not wanting to renew it." "The landlord raised the rent significantly," Sophia explained. "It doesn't make financial sense anymore." "What if you didn't need to find another apartment?" Adrian suggested carefully. "What if you and Marco stayed permanently?" Sophia's breath caught. "Adrian, I'm not proposing marriage, not yet," he clarified with a gentle smile. "Though I'm not ruling it out for the future. I'm simply suggesting that you and Marco move from the guest house into the main house. We already function as a family unit." The children would be thrilled. And you? Sophia asked softly. What would make you thrilled? Adrian's expression grew tender. Having you there when I wake up, watching Marco and Lily grow up together. Building a life with you, Sophia. That's what would make me happy. Sophia looked down at their joined hands, emotion overwhelming her. The life he described was everything she'd ever wanted. Stability, partnership, love. Yet the secret she carried made it seem impossibly out of reach. I need to think about it, she finally replied, meeting his gaze. It's a significant step. Disappointment flashed briefly in Adrian's eyes before understanding replaced it. Of course. Take all the time you need. As they drove home, Sophia stared out the window, her reflection ghosted against the dark glass. Behind her composed exterior, panic churned. She couldn't accept Adrian's offer without telling him the truth, a truth that might destroy everything they'd built. For 3 days, Sophia wrestled with her decision. She moved through her hospital shifts mechanically, her mind consumed with the impossible choice before her. During a rare quiet moment in the doctor's lounge, she researched Adrian's company once more. Maxwell Enterprises operated in over 40 countries, held government contracts, and maintained a sterling public reputation. Adrian himself sat on multiple boards and foundations. His life was conducted in the public eye, subject to scrutiny and high ethical standards. What would exposure of her secret do to him, to his company, to Lily? That evening, she found herself alone in the guest house bathroom, staring at the documents hidden in a water-resistant pouch at the bottom of her medical bag. Forged birth certificates, falsified immigration papers, evidence of her crime, preserved because she couldn't bear to destroy the only documentation of Marco's existence. Forged birth certificates, falsified immigration papers, evidence of her crime, preserved because she couldn't bear to destroy the only documentation of Marco's existence. Sophia sank to the floor, papers clutched to her chest, tears streaming down her face. For 3 years she'd lived with the constant fear of discovery. She'd chosen smaller hospitals over prestigious positions, avoided research publications that might bring attention, declined conference invitations that required travel. She'd constructed a careful life designed to protect Marco. Now, falling in love with Adrian Maxwell had shattered that careful existence. His world was too visible, too scrutinized. A background check, standard for spouses of high-profile executives, would eventually reveal inconsistencies in her history. Yet the thought of leaving him, of taking Marco away from Lily and the happiness they'd found, was equally unbearable. Sophia heard Marco's laughter flow through the window. He and Lily were playing tag in the garden with Adrian. The sound crystallized her decision. Adrian deserved the truth, whatever the consequences. The following evening, after the children were asleep, Sophia asked Adrian to join her in the guest house kitchen. Her hands trembled as she set 2 mugs of tea on the table. I've made my decision about your offer, Sophia began, her voice steadier than she felt. Adrian's face brightened. And before I answer, there's something I need to tell you, Sophia replied, unable to meet his eyes. Something about Marco. About my past. Adrian reached across the table, covering her hand with his. Whatever it is, we can handle it together. Sophia finally looked up, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. You say that, but you don't know. Your position, your company's reputation. Everything could be affected. Nothing about your past could change how I feel, Adrian insisted. Sophia took a deep breath. Marco isn't my biological son. Adrian's expression registered surprise but not shock. He's adopted? That's not legally, Sophia interrupted, her voice dropping to nearly a whisper. 3 years ago, while working with Doctors Without Borders in a conflict zone, I treated a family caught in crossfire. The parents died, but I saved their baby, Marco. He had no relatives and the country was in chaos. I couldn't bear to leave him to an uncertain fate in an overwhelmed orphanage. She continued, words tumbling out as if a dam had broken. I falsified papers, Adrian. I created a birth certificate showing I was his mother. I smuggled him out of the country. What I did was illegal, even if my intentions were good. If it ever came to light, I could lose everything. Marco could be taken away. Adrian sat in stunned silence. I've lived in fear every day, Sophia continued. I've built a respected career, but it's all at risk. That's why I can't plan a future with you. Your life is too public. Your company too prominent. Someone would investigate, and the truth would come out. Adrian stood, pacing the small kitchen. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Because I fell in love with you, Sophia answered simply, and for a little while, I wanted to pretend I could have this life. Adrian ran a hand through his hair, processing her revelation. There must be a way to address this legally, to properly adopt him now. I've consulted attorneys, Sophia replied. Coming forward now would trigger immigration investigations, possibly criminal charges for document fraud. Even with the best lawyers, I'd risk losing Marco while the case proceeded. My company has resources, Adrian began. Connections that could. That's exactly why I have to leave, Sophia interrupted gently. I won't let you compromise your integrity or your business for us. You have shareholders, employees who depend on you, Lily's future to consider. One wrong move could destroy everything you've built. Adrian stared at her, conflict evident in his expression. You're making this decision unilaterally. What about what I want? What about what Marco and Lily want? Sometimes love means protecting people from difficult choices, Sophia replied, tears finally spilling over. I won't be responsible for damaging your life, Adrian. So you'll just disappear. Take Marco away from the first stable home he's known, away from Lily, who already considers him a brother. Adrian's voice rose slightly before he controlled it. It's better to break their hearts now than to have Marco taken away later, Sophia whispered. Children are resilient. They'll heal. Adrian shook his head, moving toward the door. I need time to think. This is a lot to process. When Adrian returned to the guest house the following morning with coffee and a proposal for how they might legally address her situation, he found it empty. Sophia and Marco were gone, leaving only a note thanking him for his kindness and asking him not to contact them. For Marco's safety, she wrote, it was better this way. Friends, sometimes the hardest truths are the ones we keep hidden, not out of malice, but out of fear and love. Sophia's confession reveals the impossible choice many face between following legal systems that sometimes fail the vulnerable and following one's moral compass at great personal risk. What would you have done in Sophia's position, or in Adrian's? These questions have no easy answers, which is why they resonate so deeply with our own lives and choices. If you're finding value in this story, please take a moment to give it a thumbs up. Your engagement helps our channel reach more viewers who appreciate these complex narratives about human resilience and difficult choices. For those who haven't joined our community yet, now is the perfect time to subscribe. Click that button and enable notifications so you'll know immediately when new stories arrive. I'm particularly interested in your thoughts on this turning point. Would you have made the same choice as Sophia? Do you think Adrian should have fought harder to keep them from leaving? Share your perspective in the comments below. Your insights often illuminate aspects of these stories I hadn't considered. Now let's continue our journey to discover whether love and determination can overcome seemingly impossible obstacles. 2 weeks passed without word from Sophia. Adrian moved through his days mechanically, going through the motions of business meetings and conference calls while his mind remained fixed on the empty guest house visible from his office window. Explaining Sophia and Marco's sudden departure to Lily had been one of the hardest conversations of his life. But why did they leave without saying goodbye? Lily had asked, tears streaming down her face. Did we do something wrong? No, sweetheart, Adrian had assured her, holding her close. Sometimes adults have complicated reasons for the decisions they make. Sophia cares about us very much. That's why this is so difficult. Now, alone in his study late at night, Adrian reviewed everything he knew about Sophia's situation. As a businessman, he'd built his career on analyzing problems and finding solutions. This was no different, except that his heart, not just his mind, was fully invested in the outcome. On his desk lay a dossier compiled by his assistant. Public records of Sophia's career, her publications, the timeline of her work abroad. The 3-year gap between her return from Doctors Without Borders and her appearance at Lakeside Memorial Hospital now made sense. She'd been establishing a new identity for Marco, creating a history that would withstand casual scrutiny. Adrian opened his laptop, reviewing his notes from the night of Sophia's confession. She'd mentioned falsified documents, illegal entry into the country, fear of immigration investigations. The legal implications were serious, potentially criminal, yet he couldn't reconcile these facts with the woman he knew. Sofia Rivera had saved countless children through her surgical skills. She'd risked her career, her freedom, everything to rescue an orphaned infant from a war zone. Her crime, if it could be called that, was one of compassion, not malice. Adrian stood, walking to the window to stare at the city lights below. What would he have done in her position, faced with a dying child, a collapsed system, bureaucratic barriers to legitimate adoption? The answer came with certainty, exactly what she did. The realization shifted something fundamental in his perspective. This wasn't about legality, it was about justice, about the gap between law and morality, about family and what it truly meant. Adrian returned to his desk and pulled out a legal pad. If Sophia wouldn't allow him to help for fear of damaging his reputation, he would have to find a solution that protected all of them. Her, Marco, his company, and Lily. It wouldn't be easy, but nothing worthwhile ever was. Dawn found Adrian still at his desk, surrounded by legal texts and immigration statutes. Mrs. Winters discovered him there when she arrived to prepare breakfast, his shirt rumpled, eyes red from lack of sleep. "Sir, you need rest," she admonished gently, setting down a cup of coffee. Adrian looked up, determination evident despite his exhaustion. "What I need is to bring them home." Mrs. Winters smiled knowingly. "I was wondering how long it would take you to reach that conclusion." "Was it that obvious?" Adrian asked. "That you love them? That Lily needs them? That this house hasn't felt like a home since they left?" Mrs. Winters raised an eyebrow. "Yes, quite obvious to anyone with eyes." Adrian sipped the coffee gratefully. "Sophia believes she's protecting me, protecting my reputation and business by staying away." "A noble but misguided notion," Mrs. Winters commented. "Some things are worth fighting for, regardless of risk." Adrian nodded, his resolve crystallizing. "I built Maxwell Enterprises from nothing. I've navigated regulatory challenges, market crashes, and corporate takeover attempts. If I can manage all that, I can certainly find a way to help the woman I love and a child who deserves a permanent home." That morning, Adrian made 3 phone calls that would change the trajectory of their lives. The first was to his company's board of directors, requesting an emergency meeting. The second was to James Whitman, his longtime friend and the country's foremost immigration attorney. The third was to Dr. Helena Chen, the chief of surgery at Lakeside Memorial and Sophia's direct supervisor. By noon, his plan was in motion. The board meeting was predictably tense. Adrian laid out the situation honestly but strategically, emphasizing the humanitarian aspects of Sophia's actions and the opportunity for Maxwell Enterprises to lead on international adoption reform. "Our foundation already works in conflict zones," Adrian explained to the concerned executives. "We're perfectly positioned to establish legitimate channels for orphaned children to find homes. Dr. Rivera's situation can serve as the catalyst for a program that could help thousands of children worldwide." By meeting's end, he had their cautious support, contingent on proper legal guidance and public relations management. James Whitman was more direct in his assessment when they met that afternoon. "It's complicated, Adrian. Your doctor friend committed multiple federal offenses. Under normal circumstances, she could face deportation and criminal charges, and the child would enter the system." "These aren't normal circumstances," Adrian countered. "No, they're not," Whitman agreed. "You're Adrian Maxwell, which opens doors. But even your influence has limits when it comes to federal immigration law." "I'm not asking for special treatment," Adrian clarified. "I'm asking for a path forward that recognizes the humanitarian nature of her actions and keeps a child with the only parent he's ever known." Whitman studied him thoughtfully. "There might be a way. It won't be quick or easy, but with the right approach." He pulled out a legal pad. "Let me outline what we're dealing with." For the next week, Adrian threw himself into researching every possible avenue for Marco's legal adoption. His dining room became command central, covered with immigration forms, international adoption protocols, and case studies of similar situations. James Whitman assembled a team of specialists, immigration lawyers, international adoption experts, former State Department officials, and humanitarian law professors. They worked around the clock, identifying precedents and developing strategies. "Humanitarian parole could be our starting point," suggested Elena Vasquez, an adoption specialist who'd worked extensively in conflict zones. "It's designed for urgent humanitarian reasons or significant public benefit. The difficulty is that the child has already been in the country for 3 years under false pretenses," countered Michael Reeves, the immigration attorney. "That complicates the narrative." "Then we create a new narrative," Adrian interjected. one that acknowledges the initial irregularity but focuses on the child's welfare and Dr. Rivera's exceptional circumstances. The breakthrough came from Professor Diane Hamilton, a humanitarian law expert who specialized in children's rights in conflict zones. What if we approach this through the lens of refugee protection rather than adoption fraud? She proposed. The key is to establish that Dr. Rivera acted out of necessity because legitimate channels had collapsed during the crisis. We document the country conditions, the orphanage system failures, the imminent threat to the child's life. Combine that with Maxwell Foundation's new initiative, focused on orphaned children in conflict zones, added James, and we create a framework that helps legitimize Dr. Rivera's case while establishing improved protocols for the future. Adrian leaned forward. How do we proceed? It requires transparency with certain officials, Professor Hamilton explained. Controlled disclosure to the right people at USCIS and the State Department. Dr. Rivera would need to formally apply for legal guardianship now, acknowledging the circumstances of how Marco came into her care. And the risks? Adrian asked. Significant, James admitted. There's no guarantee. She could still face legal consequences. Marco could be placed in temporary custody during proceedings. Adrian nodded, absorbing the harsh reality. But there's a path forward. That's what matters. By the end of 2 exhausting weeks, they had developed a comprehensive strategy, one that balanced legal requirements with humanitarian considerations, that leveraged Adrian's resources and reputation without seeking to circumvent the law. Now came the hardest part, convincing Sophia to trust the process. Finding Sophia proved unexpectedly challenging. She hadn't returned to work at Lakeside Memorial, instead taking an extended leave of absence. Her apartment remained vacant. None of her colleagues knew, or would reveal, where she'd gone. It was Dr. Chen who finally provided the crucial information, after Adrian convinced her of his intentions. She's staying with her cousin in Brighton Heights, Dr. Chen confided. Small apartment complex on Maple Street. She's afraid, Adrian, afraid that her past will catch up with her, that Marco will be taken away. I want to help her, Adrian assured the older doctor. I have a plan, but she needs to trust me. Dr. Chen studied him carefully. Don't make promises you can't keep. That child is everything to her. I know, Adrian replied. They both mean everything to me too. The following morning, Adrian drove to Brighton Heights, a modest neighborhood 40 minutes from the city. He carried a briefcase filled with documents outlining the legal strategy his team had developed. In his pocket was a small velvet box, not for today, but for the future he still believed possible. The apartment complex was a far cry from his estate, or even Sophia's previous apartment, a testament to how thoroughly she'd gone into hiding. He located Unit 312 and stood before the door, heart pounding, before knocking firmly. Long moments passed before he heard movement inside. The door opened a crack. Secured by a chain, Sophia's face appeared, eyes widening in shock. Adrian, how did you— May I come in? He asked quietly. Please, 5 minutes is all I ask. Sophia hesitated, then closed the door to remove the chain. When she reopened it, Adrian could see Marco peering curiously from behind her legs. Mr. Adrian, the boy exclaimed, rushing forward to hug him. Adrian knelt, embracing Marco tightly. Hey, buddy, I've missed you. I missed you too, Marco replied earnestly. And Lily, is she here? Not today, Adrian said gently. But she sends her love. Sophia's expression remained guarded as she gestured Adrian inside. The apartment was small but neat, with few personal belongings, ready for another quick departure if necessary. Marco, why don't you go finish your drawing in your room? Sophia suggested. I need to talk to Mr. Adrian alone. Once Marco had reluctantly retreated, Sophia turned to Adrian, arms crossed defensively. How did you find us? That's not important, Adrian replied. What matters is why I'm here. Adrian opened his briefcase, spreading documents across the small kitchen table. I've spent the past 2 weeks consulting with the top immigration attorneys and international adoption specialists in the country. We've developed a strategy to address Marco's situation legally and permanently. Sophia stared at the papers, her expression shifting from wariness to confusion. You did all this? After what I told you? Because of what you told me, Adrian corrected. Your actions were born of compassion, not criminal intent. The legal system needs to recognize that distinction. He outlined the plan, a humanitarian parole application combined with a formal adoption process, leveraging his foundation's work in Marco's birth country to create a legitimate narrative about Sophia finding Marco during her medical work and following proper channels belatedly. It involves coming clean to certain officials, Adrian explained, but with the right legal team, Marco stays with you. It won't be easy, but we can make this right. Sophia sank into a chair, tears streaming down her face as she examined the documents. Why would you do this? I deceived you. I broke the law. Adrian knelt beside her chair, taking her hands in his. You saved a child and gave him a loving home when the systems meant to protect him had collapsed. That's not a crime in my eyes. It's an act of profound love. He continued softly, and I love you both too much to let fear keep us apart. The risks to you, to your company, Sophia began. Are mine to accept, Adrian finished firmly. My board understands the situation. We're establishing a new foundation initiative specifically focused on orphaned children in conflict zones. Your case becomes part of a larger mission to improve broken systems. Sophia looked up, hope warring with caution in her expression. And if it doesn't work, if they decide to prosecute me, to take Marco, then we fight, Adrian said simply. Together, with every resource at our disposal. I can't promise it will be easy or quick, but I can promise you won't face it alone. Sophia's fingers trembled as she touched the papers before her, documents representing a possible future she'd stopped believing in. Lily asks about you every day, Adrian added quietly. She misses her brother. Fresh tears spilled down Sophia's cheeks. We miss them too. So much. From the hallway came Marco's voice. Can I come out now? I finished my drawing. Sophia wiped her eyes, looking to Adrian with the first glimmer of hope he'd seen since entering the apartment. Yes, sweetheart. Come show us what you made. Marco raced into the room, proudly displaying a crayon drawing of 4 stick figures standing together, holding hands beneath a bright sun. It was nearly identical to the one that had hung on Adrian's refrigerator. It's our family, Marco explained simply, as if nothing could be more obvious. Adrian and Sophia's eyes met over the child's head, a silent understanding passing between them. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, for the sake of the family this small boy had drawn with such certainty. The process began with a single meeting in the tastefully appointed conference room of Whitman and Associates. Sophia sat beside Adrian, hands clasped tightly in her lap as she faced the assembled team of legal experts. I need to be absolutely clear about what we're undertaking, James Whitman began, his tone gentle but direct. This will be challenging, lengthy, and at times deeply uncomfortable. There will be moments when it feels hopeless. Are you prepared for that? Sophia nodded, her resolve evident despite her anxiety. I've lived with uncertainty for 3 years. At least now we're moving toward a resolution, whatever that may be. The legal strategy unfolded in careful stages. First came documenting Marco's origin story, the tragic circumstances of his biological parents' deaths, the collapsed infrastructure in his birth country, and the medical crisis that had placed him in Sophia's care. We need to reconstruct everything, explained Elena Vasquez, the international adoption specialist. Hospital records, witness statements from other aid workers, documentation of orphanage conditions at the time. Sophia spent days with the team, recounting every detail she could remember about those chaotic weeks. She provided names of colleagues who had witnessed the situation, coordinates of the field hospital where she treated Marco, dates and locations that could be cross-referenced with conflict reports. Your medical logs from that period would be invaluable, James mentioned. Did you maintain any official records? I kept duplicate treatment notes, Sophia admitted, against protocol, but I couldn't bear the thought of those children becoming nameless statistics. They're in a safety deposit box under my maiden name. Adrian observed these sessions with growing admiration. Sophia's memory was precise, her documentation meticulous, despite the crisis conditions she'd worked under. Her actions revealed not impulsiveness, but careful consideration under impossible circumstances. The next phase involved approaching selected officials at the State Department and Citizenship and Immigration Services. James leveraged long-standing relationships to arrange confidential preliminary discussions. We're not seeking special treatment, he explained to the officials. We're requesting guidance on the appropriate process for an exceptional case with significant humanitarian dimensions. These initial contacts produced cautious optimism. While the irregularity of Marco's entry couldn't be overlooked, The officials acknowledged the extraordinary circumstances and expressed willingness to consider the humanitarian aspects. "The child's welfare remains paramount," noted one senior USCIS official, "and Dr. Rivera's otherwise exemplary record certainly factors into our considerations." With this tentative opening, the formal process began, filing applications for humanitarian parole, special immigrant juvenile status, and eventually legal adoption. Each document represented another step toward legitimizing Marco's place in Sophia's life. While Sophia's legal team focused on her specific case, Adrian worked with international policy experts to develop something broader, a framework that would help other children caught in similar circumstances. "The system failed Marco and children like him," Adrian explained during a meeting with humanitarian organizations. "Rather than simply finding a loophole for our situation, we want to repair the system itself." This approach served dual purposes. It created legitimate context for Marco's case, while addressing the fundamental problems that had led Sophia to take extraordinary measures in the first place. The Maxwell Foundation established the Crisis Orphan Protection Initiative, designed to create expedited pathways for orphaned children in conflict zones to receive medical care and placement with qualified guardians. The initiative included funding for improved record-keeping, DNA banking for family reunification, and streamlined inter-country adoption protocols during humanitarian emergencies. When government systems collapse during conflicts, children become uniquely vulnerable, Adrian testified before a congressional subcommittee on international children's rights. "Our initiative aims to ensure that no doctor, aid worker, or humanitarian ever faces the impossible choice Dr. Rivera encountered between following broken protocols or saving a child's life." His testimony, carefully avoiding specific mention of Sophia's case while drawing on its principles, received bipartisan support. Several legislators committed to reviewing existing regulations governing emergency guardian assignments during conflicts. The media coverage was largely positive, focusing on the initiative's humanitarian goals rather than the personal story that had inspired it. This public framing helped create a receptive environment for Sophia's case without exposing the details prematurely. "You've managed to transform a potential scandal into a compelling policy reform," James observed to Adrian. "That's no small feat." Adrian shook his head. "I can't take credit. The need for these changes is real and long overdue. We're simply highlighting problems that humanitarian workers have been reporting for years." As the initiative gained traction, it created a foundation of legitimacy that strengthened Sophia's position. Her actions, while technically outside established protocols, now existed within a recognized context of systemic failure that demanded reform. The Maxwell Foundation's new programs extended beyond policy advocacy into direct action. Adrian recruited Professor Hamilton to oversee the development of training protocols for medical personnel in conflict zones, including clear guidelines for temporary emergency guardianship when children were separated from families. In partnership with international relief organizations, the Foundation funded mobile documentation units, teams equipped to record births, deaths, and family relationships during humanitarian crises. These units included DNA collection capabilities to facilitate future family reunification efforts. "What happened to Marco occurs thousands of times annually across conflict zones," Professor Hamilton explained during the program launch. "Children separated from families, records destroyed, guardianship chains broken. Our goal is to maintain documentation continuity even when government infrastructure fails." The Foundation also established a legal defense fund for humanitarian workers who faced immigration or custody challenges related to children under their emergency care. This fund, while not directly connected to Sophia's case, created precedent for legal support in similar situations. Each program included rigorous oversight and ethics protocols, demonstrating Adrian's commitment to legitimate reform rather than simply creating convenient workarounds. He insisted on transparency, publishing detailed reports on the Foundation's activities and submitting to independent audits. "We're not looking for shortcuts," he emphasized to his board. "We're building sustainable systems that protect children while respecting international boundaries and cultural considerations." This comprehensive approach impressed government officials reviewing Sophia's case. The Foundation's work demonstrated good faith and long-term commitment to addressing the underlying issues, not merely seeking exception for one child. During a crucial meeting with immigration authorities, James Whitman highlighted this broader context. Dr. Rivera's actions occurred within a system that provided no viable alternatives. The Maxwell Foundation's initiatives ensure that future medical personnel won't face the same impossible choice. The strategy was working, slowly, methodically building credibility and context for Sophia's case. Yet each step forward seemed to reveal new bureaucratic challenges, testing their resolve and patience. 4 months into the process, the first major setback occurred. A change in leadership at the regional USCIS office brought in a director known for strict interpretation of immigration statutes. He requested a complete review of Sophia's case, effectively resetting their progress. "This is a significant complication," James admitted during an emergency meeting in his office. "Director Harmon has a reputation for by-the-book decisions with minimal consideration for mitigating circumstances." Sophia's face fell. "So we're back to square one?" "Not entirely," Elena reassured her. "The documentation is still valid. The foundation work continues to create favorable context, but we need to adjust our approach for this new audience." Adrian leaned forward. "What do we need?" "Political support," James replied frankly. "Congressional interest. Public figures willing to advocate for the humanitarian dimensions of the case." Through careful networking, Adrian arranged meetings with key legislators from both parties. Without revealing confidential details, he presented the case as an example of how current systems fail children in crisis zones. Senator Eleanor Williams, chair of the committee overseeing immigration policy, took particular interest. "This case highlights exactly the gaps we've been attempting to address in our reform bill," she noted after reviewing the sanitized facts. "I'd like to include aspects of your foundation's protocols in our proposed legislation." This legislative interest provided crucial momentum, but the process remained agonizingly slow. Each form required multiple submissions. Each submission triggered new questions. Each question necessitated additional documentation. "Why do they need Marco's birth weight?" Sophia asked in frustration after receiving yet another request for information. "The hospital where he was born doesn't even exist anymore. It was destroyed in the conflict." "They're looking for inconsistencies," James explained gently. "Each question is designed to verify the narrative or identify contradictions." Another setback came when a junior immigration officer flagged Marco's case for special review based on documentation irregularities, precisely the scenario they had feared. "We need to address this head-on," James advised after receiving the notice. "I recommend we request a formal interview to explain the circumstances rather than responding in writing." The interview, held in a sterile government office, lasted 5 grueling hours. Sophia recounted every detail of Marco's rescue, her decision-making process, and her subsequent actions. James supported her testimony with documentation of country conditions and orphanage status reports from that period. When they emerged, Sophia was physically and emotionally drained. "Did we make progress?" she asked weakly. "I believe so," James replied cautiously. "The officers seemed receptive to the humanitarian aspects, but we won't know for certain until they issue their determination." Weeks passed with no response, each day of silence increasing their anxiety. The legal process had already stretched to 8 months, with no clear end in sight. The extended legal battle exacted a heavy toll on everyone involved. Sophia returned to work at Lakeside Memorial, but requested reduced surgical hours to accommodate endless meetings and document preparation sessions. Dark circles formed beneath her eyes as sleep became elusive. Adrian maintained his executive responsibilities while devoting evenings and weekends to foundation work and case strategy. His calendar became a complex juggling act of corporate obligations, legal consultations, and family commitments. They had decided, with careful consideration for the children's emotional well-being, that Sophia and Marco would move back to Adrian's estate during the proceedings. This provided stability for Marco and reunited him with Lily, while allowing the adults to coordinate their efforts more efficiently. Yet the uncertainty cast a shadow over their daily lives. Simple family dinners were interrupted by urgent calls from the legal team. Weekend outings ended abruptly when new documentation requests arrived. Nighttime conversations between Adrian and Sophia increasingly centered on contingency plans rather than future dreams. "We should discuss what happens if the ruling goes against us," Sophia said one night as they sat on the terrace after the children were asleep. "If they decide to deport me or place Marco in temporary custody." "That won't happen," Adrian insisted, though his voice lacked conviction. We need to be prepared, Sophia persisted. Lily and Marco need to be prepared. The strain manifested in subtle ways. Sophia flinched at unexpected knocks on the door. Adrian checked his phone compulsively for updates from the legal team. Both found themselves watching Marco with an intensity born of fear, memorizing his expressions, his laughter, storing memories against the possibility of separation. Even their relationship suffered under the weight of uncertainty. Conversations about their future together, once filled with hope and possibility, became tentative, conditional. The engagement ring Adrian had purchased remained hidden in his desk drawer, awaiting resolution before he could properly propose. "I feel like we're living in suspended animation," Sophia confessed during a rare moment of quiet. "Neither moving forward nor giving up, just frozen in this limbo of waiting." Adrian took her hand. "When this is resolved, and it will be resolved, we'll make up for this time. I promise you that." Despite their efforts to shield the children, Marco and Lily sensed the underlying tension. Marco began experiencing nightmares again, waking in tears and calling for Sophia. Lily grew uncharacteristically quiet, observing the adults with worried eyes. On a rainy Saturday afternoon, Adrian found the children huddled in Lily's room, surrounded by art supplies and whispering intently. They fell silent when he appeared in the doorway. "What are you two plotting?" he asked lightly. Lily and Marco exchanged glances before Lily spoke. "We're making good luck charms for Marco's papers." Adrian entered the room, kneeling beside them. "Good luck charms?" Marco nodded earnestly. "So the government people will let me stay with Mom and you and Lily." Adrian's heart constricted. Despite their careful wording around the children, they had clearly understood more than the adults realized. "Can I see what you've made?" he asked gently. Lily proudly displayed a collection of folded paper stars in various colors. Mrs. Winters says in her country, 1,000 paper stars can make wishes come true. We've made 142 so far. Marco showed Adrian his contribution, a series of drawings depicting their family engaged in various activities, playing in the garden, eating dinner together, reading bedtime stories. "These are wonderful," Adrian said, his voice thick with emotion. "May I ask why you're making them?" "Because grown-ups can't fix everything with just talking," Lily explained with the simple wisdom of childhood. "Sometimes you need magic, too." That evening, Adrian shared the children's project with Sophia. "They understand more than we've told them," he said. "They're creating their own ways to cope with the uncertainty." Sophia wiped away tears. "We've tried so hard to protect them from the stress. Perhaps we need to be more direct," Adrian suggested. "Not with the legal complexities, but with the core truth. That we're fighting to stay together as a family, and that we won't give up." The following day, they gathered the children for a carefully planned conversation. Using age-appropriate language, they explained that some important people were deciding whether Marco could officially become Sophia's son on paper, just as he already was in their hearts. "Are they going to take me away?" Marco asked, his lower lip trembling. "We're doing everything possible to make sure that doesn't happen," Sophia assured him, pulling him close. "Many people are helping us." "Like who?" Lily wanted to know. "Lawyers, judges, doctors, even some people who make laws," Adrian explained. "And no matter what happens, we are a family. We will stay together." The conversation seemed to ease some of the children's anxiety. Their good luck charm project continued, but with less secrecy and more family involvement. Adrian and Sophia began adding their own stars to the growing collection, turning an act born of fear into a symbol of unity and hope. As the paper stars multiplied and the legal proceedings dragged into their 9th month, the family developed a new bedtime ritual, adding 1 star each night to a glass jar, accompanied by a positive thought or memory from the day. "Remember the worth of what we're fighting for," Adrian would say as they gathered for this nightly moment. "Not just documents or legal status, but this, our family, our love, our future together." The call came on a Tuesday morning, exactly 8 months and 12 days after they had begun the process. Sophia was preparing for a surgery when her phone lit up with James Whitman's name. She stepped into the hallway, heart pounding. "Sophia," James began, his professional tone giving nothing away. "We've received the determination." She closed her eyes, bracing herself. "And?" "The application for Marco's permanent legal adoption has been approved," James said, his voice finally breaking into warmth. "He is officially, legally your son." Sophia's knees weakened. She leaned against the wall, tears streaming freely down her face. A passing nurse stopped with concern. but Sophia waved her on with a shaky smile. "There are no conditions?" she managed to ask. "No additional reviews or probationary periods?" "None," James confirmed. "The humanitarian parole application was approved based on the exceptional circumstances of his rescue. The adoption decree acknowledges your continuous care since infancy and recognizes your legal parenthood retroactively from the date you first took responsibility for him." "How is this possible?" Sophia whispered. "After everything." "A combination of factors," James explained. "Senator Williams's advocacy was instrumental. The documentation from your colleagues at Doctors Without Borders corroborated every detail of your account. Adrian's foundation work created a framework that helped officials understand the context of your actions. And the immigration issues, the entry documentation, resolved through the Special Humanitarian Consideration Clause. There will be no penalties or further investigation." Sophia slid down the wall until she sat on the cold hospital floor, oblivious to passing staff. 3 years of constant fear, of looking over her shoulder, of protecting Marco from a threat he couldn't understand, ended with a phone call. "Sophia, are you still there?" James asked. "Yes," she managed. "I need to tell Adrian. And Marco, how do I tell Marco?" "Tell him he's yours," James said simply. "Forever and officially. No one will ever take him away." Sophia canceled her surgeries for the day, something she had never done before, and rushed to Marco's school. The principal, who knew something of their situation, allowed Sophia to take him early. Next, she drove to Maxwell Enterprises, where security recognized her and waved her through to the executive floor. Adrian was in a board meeting when his assistant interrupted with an urgent message. He excused himself, finding Sophia and Marco waiting in his office, both with identical expressions of barely contained excitement. "It's done," Sophia said simply, her eyes shining. "He's ours, legally, forever." Adrian crossed the room in 3 strides, gathering them both into his arms. "I knew it would happen," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I never doubted." Marco looked between them, understanding something momentous had occurred but not its full significance. "Does this mean no more meetings with the serious people?" he asked. Adrian laughed, lifting the boy into his arms. "No more meetings with the serious people. No more paperwork. No more worry." "Can we have ice cream to celebrate?" Marco asked practically. "Ice cream, cake, whatever you want," Adrian promised. "This calls for the biggest celebration ever." They collected Lily from school, explaining the news in terms she could understand, that Marco was now officially part of their family in every way, including on paper. "I already knew that," Lily said with the certainty of a child. "We made enough paper stars." That evening, surrounded by ice cream sundaes and impromptu decorations, the 4 of them celebrated not just a legal victory, but the end of living in fear. For the first time since Marco had come into her life, Sophia felt the weight of constant anxiety lift from her shoulders. 3 days after the adoption approval, Adrian suggested a family hike to the mountain overlook that was Lily's favorite spot. The autumn morning dawned clear and cool, perfect for their adventure. The children raced ahead on the trail, collecting colorful leaves and interesting stones, while Adrian and Sophia followed at a more leisurely pace, hands intertwined. "Remember our first real conversation?" Adrian asked as they climbed. "When you told me about why you became a pediatric surgeon." Sophia smiled at the memory. "I said I was drawn to the resilience of children, that there's something profound about intervening at a crucial moment and potentially giving someone their entire life back. You did that for Marco," Adrian observed, "and for Lily in a different way. After Catherine died, Lily withdrew from everything. Since you and Marco came into our lives, she's herself again, curious, excited, engaged with the world." "They heal each other," Sophia agreed, watching the children point excitedly at a hawk circling overhead. "And us along with them." When they reached the summit, a magnificent view of the valley spread before them, trees blazing with autumn colors. Adrian suggested the children explore a nearby trail to find the perfect picnic spot, giving him a moment alone with Sophia. As the sound of childish laughter faded slightly, Adrian turned to face her. "These past months have been the most challenging and rewarding of my life. Fighting alongside you, watching your strength and determination. It's only confirmed what I already knew." He reached into his pocket, producing a small velvet box. "I've carried this with me for months, waiting for the right moment. The day you told me about Marco, I bought this, because even then, knowing the challenges ahead, I was certain about us." Sophia's eyes widened as Adrian knelt on one knee, opening the box to reveal a platinum ring with a single perfect diamond. "I had a speech prepared," he admitted with a smile, "but seeing you here, with the sun in your hair and that look in your eyes, I only need to say this. I love you, Sofia Rivera. I love your brilliance, your courage, your fierce heart. I love the family we've built together. Will you marry me?" Tears glistened in Sofia's eyes as she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. 1,000 times. Yes. Adrian slipped the ring onto her finger just as the children returned, shouting about the perfect lunch spot they'd discovered. Their excited chatter turned to squeals of delight when they noticed the ring. "Does this mean you're getting married?" Lily asked, bouncing on her toes. "It does," Adrian confirmed, his arm around Sofia's waist. Marco looked up at Sofia with wide eyes. "Will I call him Dad now?" Sofia knelt to Marco's level, cupping his face gently. "That's up to you, mi amor. Whatever feels right in your heart." Marco considered this seriously before turning to Adrian. "I think I'd like to call you Dad," he decided. "If that's okay." Adrian's voice was thick with emotion as he replied, "Nothing would make me prouder, son." Their wedding the following spring was an intimate affair, held in the garden of their home with only close friends and family in attendance. Lily served as flower girl, solemnly dropping rose petals along the garden path, while Marco proudly carried the rings on a small velvet cushion. Sofia wore a simple ivory gown that caught the light as she moved. Adrian couldn't take his eyes off her as she walked toward him, her face radiant with joy. The children stood beside them during the ceremony, included in every aspect of the service. When the minister spoke of joining lives, he acknowledged all four of them, asking Lily and Marco to help their parents light a unity candle symbolizing their family bond. "Family isn't created through legal documents or blood ties alone," the minister noted. "It's forged through love, through choosing each other every day, through standing together during life's storms and celebrations." At the reception, Dr. Chen raised a toast to the newlyweds. As a surgeon, Sofia knows that healing sometimes requires boldness, a willingness to intervene decisively at crucial moments. In Adrian, she found someone with that same courage, to step into uncertainty, to fight for what matters most. Together, they remind us that the most important procedures we perform in life are the connections we create with others. Instead of a traditional honeymoon, the family took a month-long journey through national parks, creating memories together away from the pressures they'd faced. They hiked mountain trails, roasted marshmallows under starlit skies, and spotted wildlife from safe distances. In these quiet moments, surrounded by natural beauty, the final pieces of their family unit settled into place. Upon their return, Adrian legally adopted Lily and Marco adopted the Maxwell surname, while maintaining Rivera as his middle name, honoring both sides of his heritage. The paperwork was routine, almost anticlimactic after their previous legal battles, yet profoundly meaningful as it formalized the bonds they had built. Maxwell Rivera, Marco practiced writing his new name, the letters carefully formed in childish script. "That's a lot of letters. It's a name with a story," Adrian told him. "Just like you." As the years passed, Sofia and Adrian carefully considered when and how to share Marco's full origin story with him. They consulted child psychologists who specialized in adoption and identity development, determining that gradual age-appropriate revelations would be healthiest. When Marco turned 12, they felt he was ready for more complete understanding. One weekend, they took him to the family cabin in the mountains, just the three of them, while Lily stayed with friends. Sitting beside the fireplace, photo albums open between them, they shared the full story of how Marco had come into Sofia's life, the conflict zone, his biological parents' bravery, the collapsed systems that had led Sofia to make an extraordinary decision. "You were so tiny," Sofia recalled, showing him photographs she'd kept hidden for years, just 5 months old. "Your parents had brought you to our medical station because you had developed pneumonia. They waited while I treated you, but when they left to get food from the distribution center..." Her voice faltered. Adrian continued gently. "There was an attack. Many civilians were caught in the crossfire. Your biological parents didn't survive." Marco listened intently, asking thoughtful questions about the country of his birth, about the people who had given him life. "Were they good people?" he asked simply. "The best," Sofia assured him. "Your father was a teacher. Your mother was studying to be a nurse. They protected you until their final moments. And then you protected me," Marco said, understanding dawning in his eyes. "Even though it wasn't allowed?" Sofia nodded. The systems that should have helped you had broken down. There was no functioning government, no way to process adoptions legally. The orphanages were overcrowded, without basic necessities. I couldn't leave you there. So you brought me home instead, Marco concluded, and pretended I was born here. I did, Sophia acknowledged. It wasn't legal, but I believed it was right. I was prepared to face consequences to keep you safe. And then Dad helped fix everything, Marco added, looking at Adrian. Adrian smiled. We fixed it together. Your mom, me, and many others who believe that family transcends paperwork and borders. As Marco absorbed his origin story, Adrian and Sophia emphasized the philosophy that had guided their family formation, that love creates kinship more powerful than biological connections. Family is who loves you fiercely, Sophia explained, who fights for you when systems fail, who sees your value beyond documentation or circumstance. This understanding became central to their family identity. When Lily faced adolescent questions about her deceased mother and their blended family, this philosophy provided foundation and comfort. We're not together by accident or only through birth, Adrian would remind them. We chose each other, repeatedly, through difficulty and joy. That's a stronger bond than many families ever develop. This perspective shaped both children's worldviews. Marco grew interested in international relations and humanitarian law, while Lily developed passion for psychology and family therapy. Both carried their family story as inspiration rather than burden. On Marco's 16th birthday, Adrian and Sophia surprised him with a foundation established in his name, the Marco Maxwell Rivera Initiative for Displaced Children. The program provided educational opportunities for children orphaned in conflict zones, honoring both his origin and the family that had fought to give him stability. Your story matters, Adrian told him during the foundation launch, not just personally, but as a catalyst for changing how we protect vulnerable children worldwide. Years later, when asked about the foundation of their successful marriage, Adrian and Sophia Maxwell would point to honesty, courage, and the understanding that true love doesn't demand perfection. It embraces our whole story, even the chapters we're afraid to share. Friends, as we conclude this remarkable journey with the Maxwell Rivera family, I hope their story has touched your heart and perhaps given you a new perspective on what makes a family truly strong. Their experience reminds us that sometimes the most beautiful beginnings emerge from our most challenging moments, that love can indeed transcend boundaries of law, biology, and circumstance when we choose courage over fear. If this story has moved you, please take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who might need its message of hope and perseverance. Your engagement helps these stories reach those who need them most. For those who haven't yet joined our storytelling community, now is the perfect time to subscribe. Each week, we explore narratives that challenge us to consider what we would do when faced with impossible choices, how far we would go to protect those we love, and what truly matters in the journey of life. I'm particularly interested in your thoughts on this story. What resonated most strongly with you? Would you have made the same choices as Sophia and Adrian? Share your reflections in the comments below. Your perspective enriches our collective understanding. Thank you for joining me on the Mr. Ross Story Trail. Until our paths cross again in the next story, remember that the most powerful rainbows often appear after the most challenging storms. 15 years passed since that stormy night when Adrian Maxwell stopped to help a desperate doctor stranded at a bus shelter. What began as a simple act of kindness had transformed into a legacy that extended far beyond their family. Marco Maxwell Rivera, now 21, stood at the podium of his university graduation ceremony, delivering the valedictorian address. In the audience, Adrian and Sophia watched with pride, their hands clasped together, wedding bands catching the light. Beside them sat Lily, 25, who had taken a break from her doctoral program in family psychology to celebrate her brother's achievement. Life's most profound journeys often begin with a single moment of courage, Marco told his fellow graduates. For my mother, that courage meant rescuing a child from a war zone when systems failed. For my father, it meant fighting to keep our family together against seemingly impossible odds. In the years since Marco's adoption had been formalized, the Maxwell Rivera family had flourished. Adrian had transitioned from CEO to chairman of Maxwell Enterprises, focusing primarily on the humanitarian work of their foundation. Sophia had become chief of pediatric surgery at Lakeside Memorial, pioneering techniques developed specifically for children in resource-limited settings. Their home remained a haven, not just for their immediate family, but for a rotating cast of exchange students, visiting medical fellows, and occasionally children in emergency foster care situations. The guest house where Sophia and Marco had first stayed now served as temporary housing for families navigating international adoption processes. The Crisis Orphan Protection Initiative that had begun as a strategy to legitimize Marco's adoption had evolved into an internationally recognized program operating in 12 countries. Its protocols for documenting and protecting displaced children had been adopted by the United Nations and implemented in refugee camps worldwide. Sometimes, Adrian reflected as they celebrated after the ceremony, I wonder what would have happened if I'd taken a different route home that night. If I hadn't seen you standing there in the rain. Sophia smiled, the fine lines around her eyes crinkling. I believe we would have found each other somehow. Some connections are meant to be, even with all the complications? Adrian asked, though he already knew her answer. Especially with the complications, Sophia replied. They're what made us who we are. What had initially seemed like their greatest challenge, Sophia's unconventional path to motherhood and the legal battles that followed, had ultimately become the foundation of their extraordinary bond. The crisis that might have broken a weaker relationship had instead forged something unbreakable. We started our relationship with absolute honesty about our deepest fears and greatest vulnerabilities, Sophia explained when interviewed for a book about resilient families. There was no slow revelation of flaws or gradual testing of acceptance. Adrian knew the worst of my secrets from the beginning and chose to stand with me anyway. Adrian added his perspective. When you fight alongside someone for something that matters profoundly, you develop a different kind of trust. Ordinary disagreements seem manageable after you've navigated international adoption laws and immigration hearings together. This foundation of tested trust extended to their parenting approach. Marco and Lily grew up in a home where difficult conversations happened openly, where problems were faced directly rather than avoided, and where asking for help was viewed as strength rather than weakness. My parents never pretended life was simple or fair, Lily shared during a TED Talk about her research on family resilience. They showed us that love sometimes requires fighting against broken systems, that doing the right thing isn't always the same as following every rule, and that the most meaningful families are those forged through conscious choice rather than mere circumstance. The Maxwell Rivera approach to challenges became legendary among their friends and colleagues. When facing seemingly insurmountable obstacles, they would invoke what they called the Marco standard, asking themselves, if this were a child's life at stake, how hard would we fight? With what creativity and persistence would we approach the problem? This mindset led them to tackle issues others deemed hopeless. Their foundation successfully reformed international adoption protocols during humanitarian crises. Sophia's medical team developed surgical techniques that could be taught to providers with minimal resources. Adrian's company pioneered technology that functioned without reliable infrastructure. All of these innovations traced back to that initial challenge, legitimizing the family they had formed through extraordinary circumstances. At Marco's wedding several years later, Adrian offered a toast that captured the philosophy that had guided their family journey. Family is created through love, not circumstance, he said, raising his glass to his son and new daughter-in-law. It's built through daily choices to show up for each other, to protect each other, to see each other completely and love anyway. Biology creates relatives, but love creates family. This principle, that true family transcends conventional definitions, became the Maxwell Rivera legacy. It manifested in the international adoption reforms they championed, in the medical protocols Sophia developed, and most visibly, in the young adults Marco and Lily had become. Both carried this understanding into their own lives. Marco pursued international human rights law, specializing in cases involving displaced children. Lily's psychological research focused on helping blended families build resilience and connection. Their childhood experience had become not just personal history but professional purpose. The most beautiful families, Sophia often noted, are those that recognize each member's inherent value regardless of documentation, circumstance, or origin. When we expand our definition of family beyond traditional boundaries, we create space for extraordinary connections that might otherwise be lost. As we conclude the story of Adrian, Sophia, Marco, and Lily, I invite you to consider what their journey might illuminate in your own life. Perhaps you've faced moments where doing what's right conflicted with following every rule, or times when protecting someone you love required extraordinary courage. Maybe you've experienced how crisis can either divide or unite, depending on how we respond. The Maxwell Rivera family reminds us that our most defining moments often come disguised as our greatest challenges. That love, when chosen deliberately in difficult circumstances, develops a unique depth and resilience. That family, in its truest sense, transcends biology, paperwork, and conventional definitions. Their story challenges us to consider, how might we expand our understanding of family? What broken systems might we help repair? And most importantly, what acts of courage might be waiting for us in life's unexpected storms? Friends, as we reach the end of this journey together, I want to thank you for walking alongside the Maxwell Rivera family through their trials and triumphs. Your presence in this storytelling community makes these narratives possible. If this story touched your heart or shifted your perspective in any way, please take a moment to share those thoughts in the comments below. What resonated most deeply with you? What questions or insights emerged as you witnessed this family's journey? Hit that like button to help others discover this story, and if you haven't already joined our community, subscribe now to continue exploring narratives that challenge and inspire. Enable notifications so you never miss a new addition to the Mr. Ross Story Trail. Consider sharing this video with someone who might need its message of hope and resilience today. Someone facing their own impossible choice or building their own unconventional family. Finally, I invite you to carry the wisdom of the Maxwell Rivera family forward in your own life. Remember that sometimes the most meaningful connections begin with a simple act of kindness during someone else's storm. That family is defined not by circumstance but by love, and that with courage and persistence, even the most challenging beginnings can lead to extraordinary lives. Until our next story, I'm Mr. Ross, reminding you that the families we choose, and those who choose us in return, often become our greatest strength.